meeting of the Standards and General Purposes Committee. Are there any apologies for absence?
Sorry, Chair. There is 3 apologies, one from Mary Cusson and Martin Wilson, and there is another apology from Hina Bakari, but Jennifer Gold is sitting in today.
Welcome, Jennifer. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meetings, which were included in the supplementary agenda. As you can see, we're on the ball. So are they agreed? Good. Item. You need to put your mic on.
Thanks. Can I just ask for clarification on the previous minutes, page 85A, changes to deadlines for papers motions? Have the councillors, group officers had an opportunity to feed in on this? Have the timings been decided? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor. So it was agreed at the extraordinary Standards and General Purposes on the 28th of June and again at full council in July.
Thank you. It's just we hadn't heard back. Thank you very much for that.
I think it was discussed at the general meeting of the council.
Yes, it's just our group office hadn't heard what was confirmed. She's apparently, she said not. So.
What was confirmed was what we agreed.
Okay. I understand our researcher had contacted to find out, and we hadn't had a confirmation.
So I believe an email was sent out to your group officers today confirming that.
Thank you very much.
I was asking if the minutes were agreed, not whether any matters arising, because we don't have that. So declarations of pecuniary interest, are there any declarations to be made? No, good. Item 4 is the internal audit report, and that's Margaret who's joining us remotely. Margaret, are you there? Oh, I can see you. You look like you're looking down a funnel.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Would you like us to throw your rope? Have you fallen into a well?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting the background to do that, and I can't get it off. But as long as you can see me and hear me. Thank you, Chair. This is the annual internal audit report for 2021. Where I'm required to provide assurance on the council's control environment, and I can provide a reasonable assurance based on the work that we've undertaken. So we've provided 33 assurances this year. 8 of them were limited assurances, which I provided detail of in table 3 of the report. 5 of those limited assurance audits have previously come to committee for discussion. The ones that have been issued since the last committee are cybersecurity, DBS and CM2000, which were issued in May and June, finalised this year. As you can see on table 3, I've put down where we've given priority 1 recommendations and whether their actions are implemented or not. So the more recent audits are still in progress. We always follow up on the actions that they've said they're going to implement, and where need be, we also do follow-up audits and we go back and do more testing, which is what we will do this year on prepaid cards. We intend to go back and do further testing on that area just to be satisfied that the actions have been implemented. I think that's the main points I wanted to raise on this report. At the end of the report, I've given an update on the forward work on the cases that have been investigated this year. If anyone's got any questions, I can answer them.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Are there any questions? Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on the agenda item for page 11, 4.24, prepaid cards. I'm keen for the committee to hear an update on actions taken since the March committee meeting, including current situation with prepaid cards and the extent of any losses. Thank you, Chair.
Did you hear that, Margaret?
Yes, thank you. We have had an update that the actions have now been implemented. I think the only action that we have a query on are the procedures, whether they've actually been signed off, and we need to get confirmation of that. We have been sent a copy of those. The other actions have all been closed, and that's one of the audits I do want to go back and do another sample check on. There weren't any actual financial losses. It was all mainly procedural issues. There were about approximately 4,000 that were loaded onto cards, but the cards hadn't been activated, so they've been loaded on over a year ago, and the hadn't been used. So there was an issue there that we'd raised on the audit.
Thank you, Margaret. Any other questions, John?
On page 9, the table 2, assurances. I noticed in cash and bank and account payable, spaces are left blank. What should we understand by that? There were no, these areas weren't audited, or no assurances
so
to
what,
begin?
Sorry. The financial audits I try and do over a 3-year rolling program. So that's why I've shown the assurances for the last 3 years. So for cash and bank in 2021, we gave a substantial assurance. But the blank ones would be we didn't do the audit in 1920 or 1819.
Or you didn't do any audit in 2021 for cash
not
and
in those
account payable?
Not in. No. So we do a rolling program of audits on the financial systems. So for each year, you can see so in 1819, we did 6 audits. And so each year we do, unless we're aware of an issue, we may go back in and.
It's just, that I thought that those are 2 important areas which should be audited every year, but you don't think so?
Well, I have to manage the resource I have. So we have quite a small resource in audit. So I have to make sure I've got assurances on a range of audits. So I need to do procurement audits, financial systems, schools, IT audits. And I've got to look at areas where there's potential concerns or high risk. On the financial systems over the last 3 years, the audits that we've done have all come out substantial. So that gives me some assurance on that. So yeah, I mean that we wouldn't be able to go in every year, but I mean there may be we would give advice.
Margaret, don't we have to before the auditors will sign off annual accounts, don't we have to demonstrate to them that the money that we are saying is in our account is actually in our account? And if we don't audit that, how can we provide them with the assurance that they need to give us approve the accounts?
Well, external audit do their own testing on that. So they would do detailed testing on the ledger and the cash. Part of their work would involve asking questions and carrying out testing. So though they may come to us and look for work we've done, they wouldn't rely totally on work we've done. They would always do their own testing as well to get assurance before they sign the accounts off.
Do you have a supplementary on that or?
No, Chair, I just think that these are important areas which should be audited every year. Accounts to tax, accounts receivable.
Okay, Adam, have you got a question on this?
I do, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you, Chair. Question, in 4.1, it states that we've done 38 audits during 2021. Do we know, in comparison to FY20, how many were done? And in respect of the 33 assurances that had a substantial, how was the work sort of undertaken in light of COVID restrictions? Were the tests flexed a bit to get that assurance? If I can get an answer to that, then I've got another question, if that's okay, Chair.
The audit testing was, we didn't need to flex it. The only audit we would have looked at doing that was going to be the school audits, but we didn't actually go out to a school in the end. We were looking at doing a reduced programme. The other audits that we've carried out, we were able to get the information we needed to complete the audits. Most documents are held electronically. I think one of the audits, we went into, we did one on Mascot, and they had a lot of paper files, so the auditor actually went in and got those and went through them in the office. So I mean, the office is set up that people can come in, and it's COVID safe. So where we've needed to, we've gone in and copied things. I think the declaration of interest, we had to go in and get the file. So we haven't actually reduced any testing that we normally do, and we have managed to carry on and do what we needed to do. Sorry, you asked me something at the beginning. About whether it was a FY2. Would you be able to repeat that part of it? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. No. It was only how many audits were undertaken for 2019 to 2020, just as a comparable figure.
I'd have to get back to you. I'll check that. I'll let you know. I haven't got that to hand at the moment. Sorry.
Okay. Well, Adam, you had another question.
I do, Chair. Thank you. Coming on to page 11, 4.12, in respect of building control. So is it that the reconciliation of the amount of income coming in wasn't reconciled, i.e. there was no sort of level of detail control? I was just struggling to understand what exactly was the issue here. And given the sizable sort of property development that's happened over the borough, with obviously every application requiring a building control, how long has this been going on for?
Okay, thank you. The issue that we raised was the match between the invoices that are raised on the system that they use, the M3 system, and then reconciling that to the financial system where the incomes come in, to make sure that the invoice that's being raised is being paid. It's just that it's good practice to reconcile, obviously, to make sure there's none that are missed. So we sort of highlighted that as something they should be doing, to make sure that all income has been received against the invoices that are raised. So that's reconciliation between the two systems. Because we haven't, I think, I'm not sure how long it's been going on, because we'd only look at the last, our testing would be in that financial year. So I'm not sure whether this has been an issue for a while or whether it's a recent issue, but I can check that.
If you could check that and come back to us, presumably you'll know last time this was audited, and then you'll be able to see what the assessment was at that stage. So we will know that if it was satisfactory before, then we'll know that there's some time between the last time and the most recent time, there will have been a problem. Do we not ask the people who are responsible for controlling these areas of the council's work, how long has this been going on? I'm sorry if it sounds like words to a song, but
we may have. I need to recheck the working papers. So apologies, I can't. I don't want to give the wrong answer, but I will. I'll check. I imagine that it would have been asked at the time.
okay, and you'll let the members of the committee have the response.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Ben, did you have one? Roger, what do you have to say for yourself?
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't hear
I think
the
you've
question.
just
Could you repeat,
landed
please?
in it, Roger.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please? I couldn't hear that through the microphones.
Well, I think the question is
Yes.
that there should be somebody from corporate services who should have been asking the question when we got this assessment, how long has this been going on? And as the most senior member of the team present, that enviable duty falls to you.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not sure whether, obviously, historically, like Margaret, I'd need to go back and look at the files. I'm sure that question would have been asked, but I'm not sure about the answers. But I will commit to go back and find out and come back to the committee. That's all I can offer at the moment, Chair. Sorry about that.
Thank you. John.
On page 10, paragraph 4.8, where you say the audit planning discussions are held with all key people for input. I may be old fashioned here, but internal auditors, I understand them. You turn up one morning to the department and says, internal auditors, we've come in to audit your accounts or whatever it is. But you ask them for what should you audit? I wonder if that's the right way, because you're asking them what you should do instead of what you should do, getting an audit. Am I right here or wrong?
It's a mixture of things when we do the audit plans. We look at the risk registers, and we look at the any previous limited assurance audits, any known issues or fraud issues. As well as that, we attend all the departmental management teams, and that's where we discuss with them ideas of audits or things that we want to audit, but they may also raise areas that they would like audited, and they may have concerns about and want some assurance on as well. So there is a discussion at each of the departmental management teams, and all the audits that we want to cover. We also have to just make sure there's no other big projects going on at the moment, and just get the timing right. So we talk about the timing of audits, and get a contact name for scoping the audit, and any current information on that. So it does need a discussion with management, I think.
So what you're saying, Margaret, is that they don't get any surprises. They get plenty of notice that you're coming, and they've got an opportunity to cover their tracks.
Well, we do put the audit plan goes up to committee and gets agreed anyway. So it would come to this committee at the beginning of the year, and it's published what we're going to cover. But I mean, it may be if an issue comes up during the year, we would go in and look at something. But it's usually because the concerns come to us. So it never stops us doing that. We have the right to go in and look at things without notice if there's an issue.
The point here,
Brenda.
but that's not my idea of internal auditing.
I think, Margaret, John is suggesting that he would prefer that occasionally we give people a little surprise. and then they never know when we're about to spring out.
That's right.
Louise wants to say something. There's probably some legal reason why we can't do surprises. Louise.
Well, no, there's not a legal reason why you can't do it, but the audit has a number of functions, one of which is to assist the council to develop good practice and have assurance that it's doing what it should do. So it's entirely normal to agree an audit plan and scope audits with key departments. But as Margaret said, should we receive a whistleblowing concern, for instance, that something was awry in a particular team, there'd be nothing at all stopping Margaret going in and doing a snap audit, if you like, especially if one of the concerns was that there was some degree of cover up. But that's the exception rather than the rule from an audit perspective.
Thank you, Louise. Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. This is just going back to page 10 on cybersecurity. I've seen lots of emails sending out to say we should be doing these things. Purple, whatever it's called, and cyber programs. And I've actually diligently doing them, but it looks like it's hit and miss, and quite a few people haven't done them. Just recently, we had a problem where the system, some of it anyway, was closed down due to possible cyber attack. So shouldn't this be looked at in a more serious way than just leave people to do what they want to do, or not at all?
This review was because there is an issue with cybersecurity and it is a concern and it's a heightened issue. And the council has started to put more training in place, which you mentioned. The audit was done in March, probably about March time they did the testing, and we got Mazars in to do it. So they did a review across the audit partnership just to get that assurance. And on Mertens, they did raise that issue about people at that time. The training was not, was at less than half the staff had completed the training. I understand that's moved on since that. When the report was issued, it was all the actions were immediately taken on board, and certainly where they identified weaknesses on the firewall, it was implemented as soon as they were meant, because they, at the end of the audit, they did a feedback meeting and everything was immediately taken on board and implemented. So it's not one I was concerned that they hadn't taken it seriously, because the whole point of it was to provide some assurance on the council's arrangements. So I think actually following their audit, they should be in a better place. And it's something that is constantly would need review, but possibly not always by us, but other assurances to make sure that we are managing that area as the council.
Brenda?
I'm just wondering if we have some sort of program where we know who is doing what. We can't have CPDs, if that's what we call them, but we don't know who's done them and who isn't doing it. So do we have any program that tells you at any point that certain people have done it and some haven't bothered?
Chair, I can help if that's any help. So just to update what Margaret said, the latest figures for compliance are 76% as at the end of June. So a significant move on in terms of the number of staff who've completed since the audit was submitted. And absolutely, to answer your question, Councillor Fraser, there is a detailed name and shame list that's now being considered by management teams across the council every month. So we get a figure from HR every month and we know who's not on it, and we're all tasked as directors and assistant directors of chasing individuals who aren't complying with, as you say, we can't just leave it to chance. There needs to be follow-up. And it's a handy reminder to remind members that they should be doing it as well, because that naughty list might include some of you.
I think we should move swiftly on. Are there any further questions? In that case, you are asked to review and comment on the internal audit report. You have done so. You've asked some questions. So can we move on to the next item?
Chair, if I may, Sorry for interrupting. I know it's not part of the agenda, but we have our outgoing external audit partner, Suresh Patel, on the line, and he would like to introduce his replacement partner and the audit manager. And if you wish, and if you're amenable, Chair, if you'd let them do that, and then they can politely leave the meeting from that point of view. Would that be okay, Chair?
It would be rude not to say goodbye to Suresh and to say hello to his replacement. So, Suresh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies for the kind of interruption mid meeting, but just thought it'd be useful to do this introduction now. So, as Roger's explained, and Chair, as you know, I'm going to be moving on from EY actually in a few weeks' time now, and Elizabeth Jackson, who I think you can now see on your screen, will be taking over from me. Before I ask her to introduce herself, I just want to say thank you to yourself and the committee, Chair. I think it's been almost 4 years I've been your partner in charge, and you've always kept me on my toes. So thank you very much for that. I'll hand you over to Liz.
Thank you, Suresh. Hello, everyone at the committee. Hopefully you can see me now. Just to say, yeah, I'm taking over from Suresh. We've had an extensive handover, and I've met the chair with meeting with the Director of Resources as well. So I've started the work on the audit and actually kind of getting to know some of the key officers here, including Roger as well in the finance team. Just to say that I'm looking forward to working with you. I have a big background in local government audit. I started off at the Audit Commission a long time ago, and moved with the Audit Commission to transfer over to Grant Thornton. And I've spent 7.5 years there, and then I've just spent about the last year at EY doing this role. But I had 6.5 months off with my second daughter. So I came back to work in mid-April and then took over the Merton audit and a couple of others from Suresh with his leaving the firm. And yes, hopefully we'll be there in person next time round, and looking forward to meeting you all and working with you. And if I just hand over to my new senior manager, Ian Young. That's all right.
Thanks, Liz. I'm not sure if this is working.
It is.
Excellent. So yes, just to introduce myself. So I'm Ian Young. I'll be taking over from Simon Mathers, who you, I'm sure you will know. I guess a little bit background on me is very similar to Liz in that I used to work for the Audit Commission and transferred to EY, where I was a senior manager in the Southampton office for a number of years. I've had a little stint away in industry as a head of finance at a FTSE 100 company, but I'm now back at EY, back auditing the public sector, and looking forward to working with you all. Again, I've had used to work very closely with Simon, so I've had a detailed handover with Simon to get to know the council, etc., and looking forward to working with you all.
Excellent, lovely to meet you. Thank you to Suresh for all your help and assistance. I don't think I did ever manage to get Suresh to knock something off the bill, but I'm willing to hear any offers that Liz may want to make as by way of a sort of introductory gift to the council. I think I've already put that point to her, so she's had a chance to think about it. But I think she probably gets the drift of how we feel about keeping our costs down, and I'm sure she'd be impressed to hear that councillors take that duty very seriously. Done in silence.
Thank you, Chair.
Item, where were we? The item 5 is the annual governance statement, and that will be introduced by Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. This is the review of the governance arrangement in the council. So we're required to produce this, and it supports the annual accounts. The review considers the 7 core principal areas that are set out in the SIPFA document, SIPFA guidance on point 2.7 lists the areas that we've considered it against. So I look at the current arrangements, the current arrangements within the council, any changes that have happened in 2021 on each of those areas, any new procedures or policies that we're required to update. And I also consider the work that we've done in the internal audit, any external audit reviews that are carried out, or any other assurance work that I can support the principles that are outlined in the CIPFA document. So this report gives the update for the year. It also then moves on to provide you with update on actions on page 39 from last year. So for those actions, 5 of those were in progress. So that progress will continue, and I've moved them on to the actions for this year going forward. And two of the actions are now closed. Table 2 then outlines the actions that we're undertaking for the next year. So you won't be surprised on some of those on the recovery plan. So that started in 2021, and that will carry on into this year, and the recovery and modernisation programme. Obviously, the increased financial pressures felt was still significant to move on into this year, to keep an eye on that. And there's 3 new ones that have added on, which the Constitution, that was it's been to full council already, so that's sort of something that's already been actioned, and a review of financial regulations and scheme delegations, and then the review of the governance review of local authority trading companies, of the new ones, as you can see. Just if anyone's got any questions on the report, I can hopefully answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, well, can we endorse the annual governance statement as set out in the papers? Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 6 is freedom of the borough. Louise, could you introduce this one, please?
Yes, happily, Chair. This is a report recommending to you that you accept the recommendation of the cross-party working group comprising councillors Alan Brittis, Williams, Bakari and Peter Southgate, which met a few weeks ago to consider a nomination made by Councillor Alan Brittis that Richard John Guy formerly of Wimbledon AFC be nominated to receive the award of freedom of the borough status. If you are happy to agree that that unanimous recommendation, then the matter needs to go to full council to agree to convene a special meeting to award that freedom of the borough status. It's quite straightforward and a nice thing to be able to present.
Thank you, Louise. David, do you have anything that you'd like to say, given that you're the only person who was involved in this recommendation?
Well, no, I think, well, I say no, and then I'm going to say something. Just really to point out to members of the committee, especially those who perhaps weren't here 4 years or so ago, or indeed longer than that, that a procedure was put in place to ensure that if we consider the nomination of an individual to be a freeman of the borough, that there was a proper process, and that it wasn't done by acclamation when people's good sense had maybe deserted them. And I will refer specifically to Andy Murray winning Wimbledon. Everybody said, wouldn't it be a wonderful idea to give him the freedom of the borough? Without forgetting that there'd been 4 ladies who'd won Wimbledon. And it was after that that we agreed that really there was a way of doing these things and a way of not doing these things. So it should have come to all of the groups, but there is some sort of cross-party there is some sort of cross-party discussion that goes on ahead of putting a subcommittee together. And that's what happened on this occasion. And everyone was agreed that this nomination is a very good one and is to be commended.
Thank you, David. And I must say that when I heard that you would be part of this group, I knew that a good measure of common sense would be applied, and delighted that you are able to keep us on the straight and narrow. There is a number of recommendations here, and sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. But is the recommendation agreed? This has to go before full council anyway. So it was the unanimous recommendation to us. Are we content that that should go to council? Good, thank you. So that's agreed. I don't know. Now, I have no idea why that's up there, but I can assure you that Stephen doesn't have his hand up the back of my jacket. I don't think he would ever try that. So, if we can move on to the next item, which is item 7, complaints against members. That is also Louise.
Thank you, Chair. You'll recall at the last meeting you considered a revised procedure for dealing with complaints against members and agreed in principle at that meeting to establish a hearing subcommittee in the unfortunate event it becomes necessary to convene one to formally hear the outcome of an investigation. What this report does is ask you now formally to constitute that subcommittee and to take a view about whether or not there should be 5, 7 or 9 members on that committee. There are pros and cons to each as set out in the report. You might argue that a smaller committee is easier to manage and more appropriate to this kind of action. That would mean that the smaller group represented on the council would not be entitled to a seat unless an agreement was reached with the other political groups. On the other hand, they would be allowed a seat if you had 9 members of the committee, but you're becoming very close then to being a full complement of this committee in any event, which arguably would defeat the point of having a subcommittee. But it's a matter for this committee to decide which they think is the most appropriate and most manageable size. So I'll leave it there, Chair, and happy to answer any questions or contribute to the debate if it's of assistance.
David?
Louise, I've slightly forgotten. The process would be, though, that there would be the subcommittee, but if there was any action to follow from that, then it would come to the full committee. Is that correct?
No, I think we agreed that this subcommittee would have all the functions that the main committee would have had in terms of conducting the hearing, making a finding and awarding any sanctions such as those that are available to us under the current regime. Which obviously doesn't stop the subcommittee referring things up to this full committee, but the idea was that they would be a self-contained body that could make decisions in their own right.
Thank you. Louise, I just want to ask you, so my understanding is, first of all, if there was a complaint, yourself and the independent person would deal with it, and it's only if it was of a particular seriousness that it would come to this subcommittee. Is that correct?
That's correct. The very initial stage when a complaint is received is what we call the filter process to be undertaken. If the matter is deemed to be reasonably serious, and there are a number of criteria to be taken into account in deciding that, it is referred to an independent investigator. And if the investigator, having interviewed all the witnesses and considered the matter, thinks there's a possible breach, then it goes to the hearing subcommittee to determine whether they agree the recommendations and findings of the investigator or not.
But
Just add a
absolutely.
supplementary to that then. So has there been any occasion over the last, say, 3 or 4 years in which you've had a complaint that would have happened had this subcommittee existed prior?
There have been no complaints since I've been here in the last 18 months that have got anywhere near that threshold. I think the last, and Amy may have the information more to hand from before my time, but I think 2017 was the last time the matter got referred for a hearing, and it was then to the full committee. It's an infrequent occurrence and never may it remain so.
I think that's an indication of how well behaved you are. Adam, you have a question. I've seen.
Chair, thank you. So just to clarify, is there a decision tonight in respect of which sub court we're going to go for, either 5, 7 or 9, or is that decision to be taken by full council?
No, that's a decision I'm asking you to make tonight. So committees appoint subcommittees, full council appoint committees. So it's in your gift to decide the size tonight if you're able to. If not, I imagine it's something we could put into a later meeting. At the moment, as far as I'm aware, there's no urgency in convening one of these meetings.
Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that if you have too large a committee to deal with the initial bits, if there is an appeal, we will be in trouble. And so because the people from the subcommittee shouldn't be on the appeal. So for me, I'm just thinking that, well, it won't be too small if we have 5. 5 is a reasonable number, I think.
I think that's a fair point. There isn't actually a right of appeal against the decision, but the point's still well made, Councillor Fraser, that given that councillors know each other by definition, then it might be quite hard to find a larger group if it had a significant quorum and haven't already been involved in some way or have a close association with a councillor, such that they might have to recuse themselves.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of thoughts and then a question. I take Councillor Fraser's points, and I did think of that myself, and thinking my initial instinct was to keep it as tight as possible. However, if it is as rare as thankfully it is, and I think there is the question about, even though we hopefully would all agree that proportionality in this case wouldn't quite be as impactful as you'd want it to be. I think we're in a good council that treats these matters seriously, whatever party you're on. And so I am minded that it is so rare that you'd go to a larger group to have as much proportionality as possible in terms of creating a kind of room of peers in a way that's large. What I would say is, yeah, you are kind of risking then involving too many people if it does carry on over a while and there's appeals. Are there any members such as the cabinet that could not be on this panel, for instance? Is there limitations in that way?
No, there's no reason why a cabinet member can't be on the committee, but it couldn't only comprise cabinet members. Well, clearly it couldn't anyway, because it has to be proportionate. But in some councils, the whips, the whips of the party groups, the ones that are nominated. Other people, it's a sort of almost a random selection. Clearly, you need people who've got skills to be able to, sort of wade through what might be quite complex arguments and digest paperwork. But there's no reason why that couldn't be anyone on the council.
Nick.
From my point of view, I think I can see why it is, but it's a pity that proportionality has to apply, because realistically, the larger the group, the more likely that the committee will be tempted, not going to say that it's going to, but be tempted to split along party political lines, which is obviously not what the whole process is about. It's about a completely different situation. On the basis that it's got to be done this way, I'd suggest that it was made as small as possible, purely from my own experience of sitting on such committees. That the less people there are involved in the decision making, the more likely you are to come to a decision. for it to be a fair one. Thanks, Chair.
David?
When we discussed this in the working group, I think I think the size of the committee hadn't, and the implications of proportionality were not something that had entered into consideration. I'm sort of minded that perhaps if, and thank you to Louise for reminding us, I'm minded to say that probably a subcommittee of 7 would be better. We certainly don't want a committee of 9, otherwise we might as well just leave it all with the existing committee. Having said that, and those who were involved in the 2017 investigation, we met on about 3 or 4 occasions, and we had to keep the same people, and it became quite difficult to ensure that we could get everybody there, because you couldn't have substitutes halfway through a hearing. So I think 5 out of, well, even 5 out of 57 seems like quite a small committee to decide on these things. If we go for 9, then we might as well go for 12 and leave it as the whole committee. So I'm sort of rather strange logic perhaps, but I've got a feeling that 7 might be a bit better. And maybe if I put that as a motion, if somebody seconds it, at least we have something on the table.
You wanted to speak, but you might now want to second.
Yeah, no, I'll second that.
Okay. Do you want to speak? Okay. I mean, just respond. Sorry, Dickie.
Frankly, I think for the fact that this only covers the rest of this term, and proportionality may well change, of course, at the next election anyway, I absolutely agree. But I'm sure Councillor Southgate won't forgive me, won't like this, but I agree that having 9 committee members is actually quite silly. I don't see any value in that at all. I'm sure I'm much more likely to be in front of the committee than on it anyways. But genuinely, I really don't. I don't think having 9 committee members is particularly useful in this.
I think I actually am spotting a consensus view here. I know there's been a proposal and it's been seconded, but it seems to me that that's an eminently sensible suggestion, typically coming from David, and I'm destroying your reputation here. But can we agree that? Thank you very much. Now, Louise, you've kept us in suspense about any complaints that there have been. Having told us there hasn't been any big problems since 2017, you're about to reveal that there are several dozen councillors up before us, or not.
Happy to say this to the clean sheet. If that's not too painful an analogy in the current circumstances.
But she did keep us all there on the edge of our seats, which is much appreciated when it's so warm in the council chamber. Okay, item 8 is the work programme, which is set out on pages 65 and 66. Can we agree the work programme? David?
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, Chair. Just a question. So I believe in the July meeting last year, we had the external auditors present to present, given that the deadline was shorter. And obviously this year, it's been pushed back due to COVID throughout external audits. The question really is given how light this agenda was this year, could this agenda point have been put with the EGM last week, or sort of just sort of keeping that in mind in terms of going forward, is if the external auditors aren't going to turn up for a specific meeting, is there any point of sort of having meetings for meeting's sake rather than sort of having them present, really?
I think those that know me well would probably recognise that I'm not interested in meetings for meeting's sake, or keeping members here all night, or repeating things that have already been said. So I support what you're saying in principle. Could somebody explain? I mean, I'm not quite clear what your point is. Are you referring to a specific meeting here, or
No. Well,
in terms of the forward plan?
Yeah, no. So the forward plan is okay in respect of what's on the sheet. It's only really getting members to think going forward, sort of this time next year, whether the July meeting could be sort of grouped together with another meeting, subject to the external auditors presenting at the September meeting rather than July, really. So,
well, I guess the time to be taking that decision would be when we know what we're facing and a bit closer to the meeting, rather than now when you're looking into the distance. So, I mean, there's always discretion for the chair to actually say, I don't think there's sufficient business to actually call you in and meet for the sake of meeting. So if you can, of course, I may not be the chair, but I'm sure they'll elect somebody with a similar outlook, because that's what you're used to. So, Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. From the meetings that I've been attending, the auditors seems to have a list outside. It's not just us that they look after, if we use that phrase. And so therefore, we'll have to be working with them to see what their agenda looks like, or their program, before we start planning where to put them in ours, I would think. Am I right or wrong?
We've always had, auditors have always got a number of local authorities and public bodies that they are auditing. Generally speaking, if we give them sufficient notice, I mean, we have had situations where Suresh has been doing us and then immediately rushed off to some other authority on the same evening. But they're very hard-working people, and we normally try and find an accommodation between us, and that's the way we'll continue to work. David.
Yeah, I don't know. Was Amy going to say something?
I was just going to come back on Councillor Bush's point. So obviously what we do is when the consultation goes around later in the year, as you'll be aware of, for the calendar of meetings that goes to council in February, one of the things that we will look at is speaking to our kind of audit and finance teams, and to see whether those timescales will change again next year, or whether they'll be similar, and obviously trying to work the meetings around that. I'm conscious that we have moved a couple of meetings to move around the accounts. So obviously what we want to try and do is avoid that next year and just have kind of clear dates going forward. So that's one of the things that we'll consult them on, is what their dates are and what dates SGP needs to be on to work around that. So obviously that's something that we can take back and discuss with them.
I think that really meets the point that I would have been making, which is that we didn't used to have really any council meeting, council committee meetings after the July council, except I think for planning, so that we can have a break, frankly. And it can be difficult. Tonight, actually, we seem to have a fairly full house. That's probably because we're not being able to jet off to our overseas homes. Well, I'm not anyway. But the serious point is that we put this meeting, this end of July meeting, in to meet an audit deadline date, that does not apply this year. And we've had to do that. I think you will remember, Chairman, as well as I do, we've had to do that, I think, in September as well, on occasion. So it should be that the dates of the meetings are dictated by the audit calendar, and that is adjusted maybe on an annual basis, just so that we don't have to have not so much unnecessary meetings, but I suppose had we thought about it a bit, when we came to our special meeting only 3 weeks or so ago, we maybe could have also dealt with this business as well.
Point taken. So are we happy with that? Yes. I mean, there always has to be a degree of flexibility. We've had situations where government have changed the timetable for the approval of accounts, and you know, there's nothing that we can do in those circumstances other than try and meet deadlines, however kind of unreasonable they may appear to be. So that will remain, I think, but I think that's been a useful discussion, and we'll certainly be talking to auditors, trying to work out the dates, and not bringing members in unnecessarily if we can possibly avoid it. Okay, thank you. Now, the date of the next meeting is down as the 21st of September, and there is possibly a need to adjust that one, and we will come back to you and let you have that date as soon as we possibly can. So if I can just serve notice of that now, and we will be sort of discussing this with the auditors as well, because it was originally scheduled for the 9th of September and we've had to move it back. So we will circulate that date just as soon as possible. And taking up David's point, I mean, if we do need to meet in July, and you know, and he's desperate to get off to his overseas home, then we could always arrange to meet there. And I'm sure he would make us very welcome. We'd have a sleepover and a bit of a meeting on the beach, and I'm sure that would be splendid, would it not? But it's very kind offer, David. Brenda.
I won't be joining you in September because I'm not allowed. I won't be allowed to join any of these scrutiny meetings. Something that you've probably seen in the papers.
We've valued your input into these meetings and understand the reasons, and I think that they're perfectly acceptable reasons. So congratulations. Well, there isn't any other business on the agenda, so it's, we've managed to get through the items in good time, and by God, I'm glad we have, because it seems to be getting warmer and warmer with every passing minute. So can I say thank you for your contribution, and take the rest of the summer off. Safe journey home as well, which is another thing I haven't been able to say too much just recently.